in this series, we're looking at why Christians believe Christianity to be true. And so far we've covered why so many people believe a creator exists, and then evidences that have shown the Bible is an accurate record of history, which is important because it claims to be a history of God revealing Himself to us so we can know what He's like. The question we're up to now is whether or not there might be a divine hand from God behind this book. Because if there were, we'd have some compelling reasons for taking a better look at what it says. So today we're going to look at some of the prophecies, that is, the predictions that are in the Bible that have been fulfilled in history, to assess whether there's any credibility to this claim.
I do know there are predictions in the Bible that have come to pass. I would say that it makes me think that God is in control.
I think if I had been shown multiple predictions in the Bible that have been proven true, I think it would just encourage me to believe that the Bible is true.
I think in one day Jesus fulfilled like 23 prophecies. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And some of them he didn't even have control over. Like, for example, the place of his birth. It's not like Jesus could go, yeah, I'm going to be born right here. Yeah, Mary, I'm just going to nudge you this way. Oh, you're going the wrong way. Here, I'm going to nudge this way. And it's not like that. He was born in Bethlehem, and that was according to prophecy.
I see that the predictions fulfilled in Jesus, and for me, that gives me so much hope and confidence in the truth of the Bible.
A lot of people know about end times, they know about the predictions in the Bible that, the world's going to end eventually one day. But I don't think that they actually look into it.
So it's like he's giving us big kind of clues, big kind of hints to who Jesus is, what's going to be, and that's almost like backing that up, giving it weight to who Jesus is.
Now, many aren't aware, but the Bible is the world's most predictive book. It's often assumed in our culture that because Christianity's been such a big part of it, and because the Bible's full of prophecies, that all the other religious books must be the same. But that's just not the case. The way the Bible includes myriads of predictions is truly unique. And it's also bold because it gives the reader a test to check the authority or truth of the Bible's claims to be a message from God. And the Bible doesn't just have a couple of predictions, it has heaps of them. In fact, so many, and spanning the events of about 5,000 years of our history, that you can look at them to assess whether there's a divine hand behind this book. Now, the most remarkable academic work on biblical prophecy is the Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy, written by the scholar J. Barton Payne. And it's a boring book. In it, Payne lists every possible prophecy and then one by one critically evaluates them to assess which are valid predictions as compared to generalizations that might be or might not be a prediction. And it's not a fun read because it's so academic. In fact, his critical method for working out what is or isn't a legitimate prediction takes the first 140 pages of the 750-page book. But it's the conclusion that's important. Because what he achieved is a study of every possible prediction in the Bible, measured against a strict criteria to assess what is or is not a valid prediction. He concluded that there are 737 verifiable predicted matters. Now, regarding Jesus, many Christians would think there are about 300 prophecies Jesus fulfilled. Payne's method leaves only 127 of those standing. And it's not that he's saying these others aren't valid. His point is more that they can't be proven to be valid. His study is about what he can prove. And as we shall see later, 127 predictions fulfilled in Jesus is huge and unparalleled. There's simply no comparison to this anywhere. Now, before giving some examples, a legitimate prophecy is obviously one that hasn't been faked or fabricated in some way. The key is therefore to be able to prove the prediction was written down before the events happened, and that the events that fulfilled it were also legitimately recorded and not changed to fit the prediction. And for the Bible, demonstrating this is quite easy. For example, for predictions like those about the Jewish Messiah that Jesus seems to have fulfilled, the predictions can't be changed because copies of the predictions exist that predate Jesus. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in a cave in Palestine in 1947, there are copies of the Hebrew Scriptures that predate Jesus. There's also a Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures called the Septuagint, written down in 250 BC, of which there's 2,000 old copies still existing today. So it's known for a fact that the various predictions Jesus fulfilled can't have been changed later to fake it. And I only mention this because we're talking about some predictions that are specific, not generalizations, and that were specifically and truly miraculously fulfilled. Let's take a look at some examples. An easy place to start is Isaiah 53, which has long been recognized by most Jews as a prediction about the coming Messiah or Savior of Israel. I'll read you some verses and you think about who this might sound like. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. He was despised and rejected by mankind. We considered him punished by God. He was pierced for our sins. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet did not open his mouth. He was cut off from the land of the living. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer, to make his life an offering for sin. Yet God will prolong his days. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. If you know anything of the story of Jesus, the fulfillments in his life are clear. That chapter alone is a miracle, and it was written 700 years before Jesus. How much of a miracle then are the prophecies? Despite what some skeptics claim, what we're looking at here really is unique. A study on the work of modern psychics showed that they had about an 8% accuracy rate, which is considered possible if you intelligently guess a few things. I predict many people will be amazed at this video, but also that some will daydream and miss what I'm saying. In contrast to this, the Bible's predictions aren't generalizations. They're specific, and there's hundreds of detailed predictions that have been fulfilled. Let's calculate what the chances might be. Professor Peter Stoner got his mathematics students to crunch numbers regarding the prophecies. For Jesus to fulfill just 8 predictions, provably written centuries earlier, the probability they concluded on was 1 in 10 to the power of 17. Now that's a 1 over a 10 with 17 zeros. And to give you an idea of that number for fun, if we were to put that many $2 coins all over the landmass of New Zealand, we'd be about 1.3 meters deep in them across the entire country. But Jesus didn't fulfill just 8 predictions. Payne's conservative study suggested 127 were accurately fulfilled, not just 8. And as I've noted, many others would consider Jesus to have fulfilled many more than this. You see, it was also predicted that the Messiah would be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and from the tribe of Judah, which all limits the number of people it could be, and from the family line of King David, of whom both Joseph and Jesus' mum Mary were descendants. But he also had to be born in a specific small town called Bethlehem Ephrath, which has a low population, and presented with gifts, which the wise men at Jesus' birth did. And he had to be preceded by a specific messenger, which John the Baptist fulfilled, and with a ministry that begins in the province of Galilee as distinct from the province of Judea where he was born. And he was then to have a ministry of miracles, and later entering Jerusalem riding on a donkey, entering the temple at Jerusalem, which means it needed to be rebuilt, and then, catch this one, to be betrayed by a friend for 30 pieces of silver, which would be thrown, not placed, into the house of the Lord, and the money given to the potter. And incredibly, the money Judas threw into the temple was used by the religious leaders who hated Jesus to buy what was known as the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. He then had to be forsaken even by his disciples, and accused by false witnesses, and spat upon and mocked, and killed by piercing, with his garments specifically divided by lots being cast for them, and yet to see life again, being resurrected. And I'm sure you're picking this up. To be the Messiah, he couldn't fulfill just some of these. He had to plausibly fulfill them all. So you can see how incredible this picture becomes when the details are studied. The Bible even goes as far as predicting when the Messiah would come. And to me, this is one of the most mind-blowing predictions in the Bible. It's found in the book of Daniel, written 530 years before Christ. And it reads as follows: Know and understand this. From the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, the starting point, until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, the predicted event, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens, which is 483 years. After the 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be cut off and have nothing. Now, if we do the math, the starting point is the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, which partially happened in 458 BC, when a Jewish priest named Ezra was given permission to rebuild the temple, but which happened in a clearer form in 444 BC, a dozen years later, when King Artaxerxes gave Nehemiah, a Jewish servant of the king of Persia, permission to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the whole city. The amazing fact is that with thousands of years to choose from, this prediction takes you across a time span of almost 500 years, from a starting point almost 100 years after Daniel the prophet's death, to Jesus. Now there's a second anomaly here, and that's that in biblical prophecy a year is sometimes calculated as 360 days, not 365. But with all those options considered, the worst case scenario is that we land at AD 20, just before Jesus' ministry, at the far end AD 38, just after his death, or in one case at AD 26, exactly when he's believed to have started his ministry. And I don't know how to prove which of those options it is to you, but it makes no difference because in all cases it's clearly taken us to Jesus. With thousands of years to choose from, a prediction through the prophet Daniel, with a starting point almost 100 years after his own time, took us across almost 500 years of history to who else but Jesus? Author Dr. Michael Rydelnik is the son of Holocaust survivors. As a young man and as a Jew, he refused to consider Jesus' claim to be the predicted Messiah. He tells of how his friend one day passed from words from Isaiah 53 on paper around his office and asked who it was about. They replied, "It's obviously Jesus of Nazareth and it's from the New Testament of the Bible." To which his colleague replied, "No, it's from the Hebrew Bible and it was written 8 centuries before Jesus came." Michael's mother had earlier become a Christian. And as a Jew, he'd felt embarrassed about that. But he realized that if he looked without prejudice, it was hard to deny they pointed to Jesus. And so, confronted with an inconvenient reality, he is one of many who have changed their minds on Jesus after a study of this topic. And he went on to lecture in Jewish studies at the Moody Institute while writing widely on the topic. So, for a conclusion, prophecy is sometimes a difficult topic to investigate. But it remains that there are clear predictions in the Bible that have been clearly fulfilled. And what this tells us is that there is a divine hand behind this book, which suggests its message might be worth looking at. The predictions also tell us that God is outside of time, which gives us a reason to trust God's good promises. And a huge number of the predictions point to Jesus, which suggests there might be something we're supposed to notice about him. I mean, who is Jesus really? What was so special about him that he had the global impact he's clearly had? Well, this will be the topic of the next part of this series. These are some of the reasons Christians believe Christianity to be true.